I sputtered, my thoughts racing at the idea of Sylvia telling my English teacher about what had happened the night before. If they ever found out, I was certain I would be expelled without a second thought. Yes, she continued, she told me that you're in serious need of some extra help in English. She even went so far as to suggest that without support, you might struggle to pass the course. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong I almost felt lightheaded. I wasn't in trouble after all. In fact, for the first time in a while, I felt a small but genuine spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't fail English after all. Yes, Sylvia helped me a great deal last night, I replied carefully. It was extremely beneficial to my studies, and the time seemed to pass remarkably quickly. That statement, at least, was entirely true. Sylvia said exactly the same thing to me. She glanced at me slightly, then continued, I want you to spend as much time with her as possible. Having an attractive and confident teacher tell me that she wanted me to spend as much time as possible with another remarkable woman was something I had never imagined before. I reflected on the idea of spending as much time as possible with Sylvia and concluded that it wouldn't be a bad thing. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a very good idea indeed. Yes, I'll certainly spend as much time as I can with Sylvia. She's an excellent tutor. I learned a great deal last night. I did my best to keep the excitement out of my voice, making it sound as ordinary and unremarkable as possible. I hope she's able to help you make more progress. She mentioned that you're having some difficulty keeping up in this class. I thought about the previous night and reflected on what I had truly been struggling with. I was certain it was an experience I would never forget. I couldn't help but wonder how my English teacher might react if she knew the real nature of that struggle. The very thought made me uneasy. I would almost certainly find myself in serious trouble if the truth ever came out. Yes, I'll do my best to improve, I said, closing my eyes briefly as I wiped my forehead. The thought of spending more time studying with Sylvia brought an unexpected rush of imagination, one I quickly pushed aside, though it lingered longer than I would have liked. All right, Nick, take this hall pass and get to your next class as quickly as you can. I accepted the pass and hurried down the hallway toward my next class. I was a little late, but the pass spared me from any trouble. Moments later, the most tedious class of the day began, geography. As I finished my morning classes with science, I found myself wondering who might be in the cafeteria when I went for lunch. I stopped by my locker, neatly put away my books, and grabbed my brown bag lunch. With everything in hand, I headed off toward the cafeteria, curious to see what the rest of the day might bring. I had just walked in when I noticed Bill and Roy both waving for me to come over and sit with them. I also saw Anna seated a short distance from Roy. She smiled at me as I approached, and I returned the gesture before sitting down across from them all. Anna mentioned that you helped her with her locker and showed her the way to her homeroom, Roy said warmly. I really appreciate you looking out for her. I think we're going to get along very well, Bill, you and I. I nodded in agreement and said, I hope so too, Roy and Bill as well. It would be great to have some friends here at school. Bill chimed in, and back home too. We all live within easy walking distance of each other. That's right, Roy agreed. We could head over to my place after school today, and you can get to know Bill and me a bit better. That sounds good to me, Roy, I replied. We passed the time in the cafeteria chatting with one another, talking about our classes, our likes and dislikes, and inevitably, the English teacher. She's really impressive, Roy said enthusiastically. Oh yeah, Bill agreed. She certainly stands out. I couldn't agree more, I added, making a playful gesture and letting out a joking whistle. Roy and Bill both closed their eyes for a moment, smiling as their imaginations wandered. Before long, however, they snapped back to reality as the end-of-period bell rang, signaling it was time to head to our next class. We're really going to have to hurry, or we'll be late, Bill shouted as we quickly jumped up from our seats and headed for our lockers. Roy took a moment to pull Anna's chair out for her, and she gave me a small smile before dashing into the hallway. As I hurried toward my locker, nearly at a run, my thoughts drifted to Terry. I wondered if she had been waiting for me at the picnic table, expecting me to come outside, and whether she was now irritated that I hadn't shown up. I hoped she wasn't upset with me, but there was no more time to dwell on it as I rushed on my way. After stopping at my locker to gather my things, I smiled at Anna, who was standing at hers, and then headed briskly toward my next class, science. Science had been my second favorite subject back in public school. There were always so many fascinating topics and hands-on activities, and I hoped this class would be just as engaging. I slipped into the classroom and had barely closed the door when the bell rang. Glancing around quickly, I searched for an empty seat, only to realize there was just one left in the front row, once again between the twins. As I settled into the seat, they both grinned at me like the proverbial cats who had just caught their prize. "Hi, Nick," they greeted me in unison. "We saved this seat just for you." "That's great, thanks a lot," I replied, managing to sound enthusiastic, even if it took a bit of effort. I really didn't enjoy sitting in the front row. It made it far too easy for the teacher to catch you doing something you shouldn't. On the other hand, I didn't mind sitting between the twins again. Despite their youthful appearances, they both carried themselves with a maturity that set them apart. More than once, I noticed one or sometimes both of them watching me with a faintly calculating expression. Yet the moment I glanced their way, those looks vanished, replaced by warm, friendly smiles. I couldn't help but wonder what they were thinking, or what might be quietly forming in their minds. Their expressions, however, revealed nothing. Those smiles were completely unreadable, giving nothing away no matter which one I looked at. Today's science class focused on crystalline formations found within stone geodes. I was able to hold my own on the topic, as my grandfather used to make jewelry from the very same crystals and geodes we were discussing. The teacher was impressed by my knowledge and even congratulated me on it. I smiled in response, and she returned the gesture. She was an older woman with a somewhat severe appearance, so I was genuinely surprised when she spoke. Her voice was pleasant and calm, and she was actually quite easy to listen to. Her severe expression softened, and I realized that beneath the steely exterior was a truly handsome woman. The twins also appeared to be impressed by my knowledge of the subject. They exchanged animated gestures with one another in what seemed like an improvised sign language of their own creation, silently mouthing words back and forth. I watched them for a moment before turning my attention back to the blackboard. Science class ended and mathematics began shortly afterward. I arrived well before the bell and found an empty desk 3 rows from the back. There were noticeably fewer students in this class than in the others I was taking, and I found myself wondering why that might be. As I was considering this, the twins entered the room along with Sylvia. They took the 3 remaining seats in the front row, with Sylvia sitting between the 2 of them. Throughout the class, the 3 of them were as close as conspirators, quietly passing notes and whispering to one another. More than once, the teacher cast them a stern, warning look and cleared his throat pointedly in their direction. I couldn't help but smile as I watched. It was oddly entertaining to see the talkative trio being cautioned about their behavior. At the same time, I found myself wondering what could possibly be so interesting that they were willing to risk the teacher's displeasure just to keep chatting about it. I turned my attention to the teacher and to what he was writing on the blackboard. I understood everything that was discussed in math class. It was the one subject in which I truly excelled. The teacher seemed to notice my aptitude and paused to jot a few notes in a notebook open on his desk. I wondered briefly what he had written about me, but I kept my attention on the lesson and continued following the material closely. By a fortunate quirk in the schedule, I had a free period as my final class of the day and was looking forward to getting outside for a breath of fresh air. I had missed the chance earlier when I didn't have a lunch break, and I was eager to step outdoors as soon as possible. Just as the bell began to ring, the teacher called my name and asked me to come over to his desk. I wasn't particularly worried. I knew I was one of the strongest students in his class. Mathematics and I had always gotten along well, we'd been close companions ever since I was first introduced to the subject. "Yes, sir?" I asked. "Nick, I can see that you are very proficient in mathematics," he said. "I wish all of my students showed the same level of enthusiasm that you do." "Thank you, sir," I replied. "Although I'm not nearly as strong as I would like to be in some of my other subjects." He nodded thoughtfully. "I know, Nick. Your English teacher and I have spoken about you in the staff room." I was certain the look of panic on my face must have been obvious as he continued, "Don't worry. She knows you're doing your best to learn the material, and that you already have an excellent English student helping you as a tutor. I felt a wave of relief when I realized my English teacher had nothing negative to say about me. I relaxed slightly, then looked at him with a hint of uncertainty, trying to understand what he was leading up to.